Hello.
Our executive director, State Executive Director Beth Hendricks has joined us. I see some names I don't recognize as LAC members, which is great. This is aimed mostly at LAC members, but we have a bunch on how you can take action if you're not in LAC. And we are interested in recruiting some additional people for LAC. So if you are, please put that in the chat also. And for late joiners, if you can mute, so dog barking doesn't join us, that would be great. And I'm going to mute myself because Andrea is going to take it from here.
All right. Thanks, Maude. Thank you all for joining us. Before we kick off, I just want to pause for a second and see if Beth has any remarks or anything that the group should know. Beth, anything for the group today?
We are having a just general get together today at noon to just have a post-election discussion. There is no agenda. It is just meant as a time for us to get together and discuss and begin to talk about next steps and priorities. So I hope you all can make it. I will put the Zoom link into the chat, and it starts at noon today. Otherwise, if you have any ideas or thoughts, please don't hesitate to email me or call me or talk to Maude or Andrea. And who else is on? Oh, Thali is here. She's on our board too. Anybody else? Oh, it's great to see so many folks. Awesome. So yeah, don't hesitate. That's what we're here for. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Beth. And that saves us a slide or two. We wanted to make an announcement about that too. So thank you for bringing up the 12 o'clock discussion. I think that will be a great opportunity. I'm going to move us off the first slide, but for anyone that hasn't had a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, please do so. Welcome, everybody, to the first of 3 LAC professional development trainings basically to get us ready for the advocacy and lobbying season for the 2025 session, which will be here before we know it. Time is flying. So we've got a 3-part training for you all. We really appreciate you being here. And I do want to note, those of you that have been here from the beginning, I think have noticed that we are recording this session. We do like to make it available to people that want to go back and review a piece of the training if that's helpful to them. Or for those that aren't able to attend today, if you know someone that might be interested in learning more about the LAC specifically, or LWVCO lobbying and advocacy efforts more broadly, please refer them to the recording. They can get in touch with me, Maude, Beth, anytime, and we can direct them to the recording. So that will be there for all of you. One thing I do want to mention, the LAC, well, I should start by introducing myself for those of you that don't know. I'm Andrea Wilkins. I'm the legislative liaison with LWVCO. My main role in that position is to provide support, logistical and technical support for the lobbying activities of the Legislative Action Committee, which Last year stood around 35 people. I think we're expecting something similar this year, although we are always open to new membership. It's really kind of a goal of ours to have representation from all of our local leagues on the LAC. We do conduct all of our meetings by Zoom to make it a very friendly environment for those that are living outside of the Denver metro area. And we do really want to emphasize that those perspectives and the information that you can bring to the table on local priorities outside of the metro area are extremely valuable. They really inform and make sure that we approach our lobbying efforts in a well-rounded way. So for anyone that might know somebody in our local leagues in other parts of the state that don't currently have representation on the LAC, or even if they do, we are always happy to talk to prospective members. So please refer them to either Maud or I, Beth. We would be happy to have discussions about getting more people connected to the group. I do want to mention that as part of our structure, Maud and I are working hand in hand. Maud is the Director of Action and Advocacy. She probably will say a little bit more about her role as I turn it over to her. Or Maud, if you would like to jump in with a little bit about your role, I'm happy to pause and let you speak to that.
Just joined at the hip with Andrea on all the many things that come up. The latest, there was one this week of, should we try to join an amicus brief on an environmental suit that's going to the US Supreme Court? I mean, it's just, the things that pop up are continual. So, and thank you, Andrea, for researching that.
Yes, never a dull moment, which is part of what makes the work really interesting and fun.
Yeah.
But yes, joined at the hip, I think, is a good description. Maud and I are working hand in hand to provide that logistical and technical support to our lobbying team. Both of us do direct lobbying as well. But first and foremost, my main role is to make sure that you all have the support and the information that you need to go out on behalf of LWVCO and conduct really robust advocacy work to further our organizational positions. The LAC Action and Advocacy Director position is actually a co-director role. And we do want to recognize Thalia for all of the contributions that she has made over the last many months. We are sorry to lose her in that role, but she is moving on to take up the LWVCO treasurer role. So that is really to our benefit as well.
Thanks.
And so we're extremely excited about that. So thank you, Thalia, for
Of
everything
course.
that you have done for the LAC.
My
And
pleasure.
we're extremely happy to see you move into the treasurer role.
Thanks.
And also continue on with the LAC as well.
Absolutely.
But that does open a co-director slot if anyone is interested, or someone that is interested. Maud and I would be happy to have a conversation about what that role looks like and just kind of how it functions as part of our team. So please keep that in mind as well if that's something that is of interest to you or someone that you know.
And I just want to also give a shout out to Beth, because we meet, Andrea and I meet with her weekly, and she is right there for us. We have always a long list of things to talk about, and her advice, her support, her let's get this done is invaluable. So thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, moving along here.
And for the record, deeply appreciate all of the volunteer service that is represented in this virtual room. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Andrew.
No, that's a great point, Beth. And before we start, I really should say that we like to refer to the LAC as really kind of the heart and soul of so many things that we do at LWVCO. Our advocacy work is what really makes things happen. And we obviously could not do that without you. We're a grassroots citizen-led organization, and your dedication and expertise and effort that you bring to the LAC is tremendously appreciated. So I mentioned that this training today, we're trying to get away from training, professional development. You all are professionals. The work that you bring to this work is very high level. And so we feel that professional development is a more accurate term for it. But I do apologize in advance for a long time we've referred to it as training, and I'm having a hard time purging it from my vocabulary. But as I mentioned, we do have a 3-part professional development series. Today is the first. There will be another session on December 13th. And then our final session will be on January 3rd. They're all running from 9 to 11 these are on Fridays. We kind of stuck with that Friday timeframe because LAC meets every other Friday. So we're just kind of trying to be consistent with the schedule there. So 9 to 11 via Zoom. Again, all these sessions are recorded and archived, so they will be available really at any time going forward.
And
oh, go ahead, Maude.
sorry, I got distracted by a text from someone who is on grandma duty today because schools are closed and can't make this meeting. So the recording is a timely reminder. And I didn't hear if you said that much of what affects everyone's daily lives happens in state capitals. And so this session today and the next two are refreshers. So we're all ready to hit the ground running for the 2025 session. And again, as we've all said, thank you so much for everything you have done in past sessions.
Thank you for adding that, Maude. I did overlook that. Yeah, we did really want to emphasize that, I think coming out of, the national election, I think we're all like kind of processing because it's been, a long haul to get there. And, we just get so inundated with what's happening at the national level that it sometimes can be easy to lose sight of really how important the local efforts are. I think this group is well aware of that, but it's worth repeating that we're so much more directly impacted by what's happening in our local communities and at the state level that, the work you do is just invaluable. And we're happy to join you in that effort. So just a little bit of, kind of a look at where we're headed today. You can kind of take a look and see what we've got on the agenda for our session today. We will be providing some real life examples of the work that the LAC has done. Some of our LAC members from past sessions, I think probably particularly focusing on some of the work that took place last session, have graciously agreed to share some of the work that they've been doing. You'll be hearing from them. We'll get into some more discussion around league actions and positions and how that really guides all of our advocacy and lobbying efforts. We're going to talk a little more specifically about the function of the LAC, ways that both LAC members can be involved, but the broader league membership can be involved as well. Our partnering process, working in coalition with like-minded organizations that share our organizational goals, and then a little bit about the legislative process. I do want to point out that this session is really designed to be very broad in nature. We hope that although it does contain some very specific LAC information, it really is intended to talk about, being involved in a general sense, both in and out of the LAC. And our next two sessions coming up will be really kind of drilling down more into the specific functions of what it looks like to be an LAC member. So just to kind of give you a sense of how we're differentiating and what is to come in the next 2 sessions. Okay, so I mentioned one of the things that we wanted to share with you today are real life examples of what the LAC looks like in action. And one of the issues that we were very involved in last session was some legislation dealing with open meetings laws. I imagine that those of you in LAC probably recall our conversations around this. Those of you outside of LAC may have recalled the media discussion. This has been kind of a high profile issue. Work is continuing, and to really kind of talk a little bit more about what the LAC and LWVCO role in this work has looked like, I want to turn it over to Linda Hutchinson, who is leading the LAC lobbying efforts around this, and then of course is a leader in the work for the LWVCO task force, the News Access and Literacy Group, to talk a little bit about the open meeting laws from last session and the ways that our work is continuing around that issue. So I will turn it over to Linda.
Okay, so I'm Linda Hutchinson. My issues team for LAC is News Access and Literacy. Last year was the first year I was on LAC, and the Senate Bill 24157 to clarify and change open meetings law for the General Assembly only was the first bill I ever read. And so that was interesting in itself. And I read it and I thought, this is more than clarification of the law. This is changing it. It changed the laws that applied to this General Assembly. So I went and read, after I read the bill, I read what media I could about that was available. And so the sponsors, their contention was, we're not changing, we're not trying to curb transparency, we're just clarifying so everybody knows what the rules are for the General Assembly. And I thought, well, that's not how I read it. So I thought, we often collaborate with the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition when we advocate for transparency. And I thought, well, I'm going to ask Jeff Roberts because maybe I'm missing something here. So I called him and he very graciously spent probably half an hour on the phone, and I asked all my silly questions and he explained everything to me. So then I brought it back to and I wasn't misreading it. I had it right. And so I took it back to the issues team and we talked about it, and we recommended that LAC oppose the bill because it, in a nutshell, I mean, there are a lot of things, but it changed the way a quorum operates, and it opens up for small group meetings that have the potential to turn into serial meetings or daisy chain meetings. And those are not open to the public, and transparency laws are pretty clear that these meetings should be open to the public so we know what they're doing. And they also changed the way emails were before were considered meetings, but that's moved them to CORA, the Open Records Law. And anybody who's tried to work with CORA knows that's kind of difficult to get anything done. So, or to find anything out, takes a long time. So anyway, we brought it to LAC and we voted on it to oppose the legislation. We went to the committee hearing, for the Senate committee hearing, and Beth actually testified in person. And then it didn't matter because they voted it passed the committee. And so then it had to go on to the Senate voted to pass it, I think, and then it went on to the House committee hearing. And before the House committee hearing, Representative Kennedy, who was a co-sponsor of the bill, asked for a meeting with the league. And so Andrea, Janine Reed, I don't think Janine's here, and I went to a meeting with Senator Kennedy. And we just asked, I think it was Janine said, I like to know the motivation behind these bills. And he was pretty open and candid with us. And he said, Representative Kennedy said that when they have to observe transparency laws, that opens them up to exposing their conversations to lobbyists, and then lobbyists come in and affect their legislation. And that's, so basically what I came away with was even more determined that we were right. But because why should we give up our rights because they're having problems with money and politics? That's basically what I thought. So anyway, being able to talk to a collaborator like the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition helped me understand. I mean, he really helped me understand the bill. And then being able to talk to Senator Kennedy or Representative Kennedy helped know, what they saw the problem being, but it also helped confirm to me, and I think everybody else, that we were on the right path. This was just going to take away our transparency in government. So that's my story. And now they were continuing to talk about possible legislation that would roll back this the Senate Bill 24157.
Friday, yes, today, yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Linda. That is a really helpful example of how the LAC operates. We oftentimes will kind of engage in a similar process for legislation that we strongly support, and work with sponsors, bill sponsors, to do what we can to mobilize and ensure that the bill passes. But in a case like this, where we're really concerned and very opposed to something, we still have those conversations with bill sponsors to figure out what's going on, what's the motivation, is there something that we're not seeing, is there a perspective we can bring to the table? And we were really thankful for the meeting with Rep Kennedy, but unfortunately we just it was a situation where we weren't going to find common ground on that. And the bill did pass despite our efforts to see the contrary happen. And now we're actually engaged in coalition conversations. They're being headed up by the Independence Institute to kind of explore what we can do, because there really is a concern that this is cutting back transparency and the public's right to know. So the effort on this continues, despite the fact that the bill did not go the way that we wanted it to. The advocacy effort continues on. I do see that Celeste has a hand. Celeste, do you have a question or comment?
I do. So you just mentioned the Independence Institute, a libertarian kind of think tank. And Linda mentioned people who are working to overturn this. Are there people in the legislature also interested in this, or is this only the Independence Institute and us?
I think there are, no, it's not just the Independence Institute and us. There was, and I can't.
We recruited Colorado Common Cause, ACLU, and what was the name of that legislator who was there?
I can't remember his name. That's what I was going to ask you. I can't remember the legislator, but there was, and there's going to be another meeting, and they've added a lot of groups to that email. So I think it's not just us and Independence Institute.
Yeah,
Great.
I think it's shaping up to be a really broad
Yeah.
conversation in terms of stakeholder participation.
Right.
And if you ever wondered about the league's nonpartisanship, the fact that we're working with the Independence Institute, again, this is not the first time, is proof positive.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Linda, for your example there. We're going to try and pepper a few of these throughout to give you, a real life example of some of the important work that is being headed up by our LAC lobbyists. And this is definitely something that, the LAC will continue to hear about as we finish out the interim and head into the 2025 session.
So.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to Maude.
Thank you. And I'll repeat what Kate Van Houten said in the chat, which is, I mean, what a freshman year, Linda. So thank you. What a big start to your first year in LAC. The LAC empowers voters and defends democracy. Some of that is through voter service, with candidate forums, ballot measure materials, education, and then we have education on a wide range of issues, advocacy and lobbying, including league stances on most of the ballot measures. Ballot measures will be where we have a position, and when necessary. And Beth has the one who can really tell us stories on this. When necessary, we take people to court or help others take people to court, do litigation. So advocacy is, one example of advocacy is publicizing the league position, supporting reproductive choice and privacy in reproductive health care. Lobbying, as most of you know, is the LAC's bread and butter. Actually, like as Linda just demonstrated, working with partners, talking to legislators to get a bill passed or killed or amended. Grassroots. We had a lot of publicity and other work to influence voters on 131, and political, such as working on a campaign for a neighbor running for city council, and that direct political campaign activity we do as individuals, not as league. All the rest we do as league. So an overview of the history of abortion in Colorado would be education, probably done by the Reproductive Task Force. They have also developed destigmatization training around abortion, which is advocacy. Collecting signatures to put what became Proposition Amendment 79 amendments on the ballot. Was grassroots efforts. I know many of the people in this Zoom helped collect signatures. Thank you. The league LWVCO was, I think, the largest source of volunteer collected signatures to get it on the ballot. And then testifying against the Personhood of Living Unborn Human Child bill, which seems to reappear every year. is direct lobbying by LAC members. And many LAC members bring deep knowledge of their issue area and have built up more expertise as they've worked in LAC. Often we know, if we're speaking in our issue area, we know more about the issue than the legislator we're talking to, because the legislators really need to be generalists. And we can speak for those who don't have the ability to go log into a Zoom meeting or meet with the legislatures or go down to the Capitol and speak for themselves. Again, we're mostly a volunteer organization, and so our biggest resource is our members' time and their expertise. And sometimes we have time and interest to work on a bill, and sometimes it's one bill too many. So LAC members, as most of you know, Legislative Action Committee members are designated to speak for the League at the state level after LAC consensus on the bill or the ballot measure. If LWVCO, the state league, or a local league wants to comment on a federal issue, we have to ask the League of Women Voters of the US, the National League, because that is their sandbox. And we only act in their sandbox with their permission, or if they have sent a national action alert. And all of us also can respond to state action alerts, and the response from state league members to state action alerts has been wonderful. It's always hundreds of responses, which is great. Or people can speak as an individual, not in the name of the league. And now I'm turning it over to Andrea.
Thank you, Maude. And I have to apologize about the slides. I'm struggling a little bit to get my two screens working together and get the chat visible and the slides visible. And so I hope I'm not making people dizzy by, I mean, I'm not sure how much is apparent to you, but if I am flipping things back and forth and distracting you, I am sorry about that. Hopefully that's done. All right, so a little bit more about the Legislative Action Committee specifically, or the LAC as we refer to it as shorthand. As I mentioned early on, last year, I think we had around 35 citizen lobbyists, members of the LAC, who are trained volunteer lobbyists that, you know, interact with the Colorado legislature on a variety of bills. You know, our goal is to ensure that legislation that significantly impacts our positions is being informed by league voice. And sometimes that impact is going to be positive, sometimes the impact is negative, and that's going to dictate what kind of stance we take on it. All of the stances that we take on legislation are based on our league positions and principles. If we don't have a position, if we don't have an organizational position that is impacted by a piece of legislation that has been introduced, then we are not going to spend our lobbying time on that. We're not going to take a position on it. So our stance on it, our organizational positions are really what guide everything that we do. As Maude mentioned, LAC members are designated to speak on behalf of LWVCO, but we do have an internal process that we want to make sure that everyone has a sense of, and you know, we'll get into this you know, more deeply along the way, but you know, we do want to, you know, kind of provide an introduction of how we reach a stance. And our work is largely carried out via issue area teams. So, our members will work together, kind of broken into issue areas. They will keep an eye on legislation that is introduced. And if it's something that impacts our positions positively or negatively, they'll look at that more closely. They will study the bill, have conversations with others in their group to determine if this is something that is significant enough that, it warrants, our efforts and time. And if so, then they will determine, what kind of impact they think that it's having on our organizational positions. And based on that discussion, they will recommend a stance that the entire LAC consider and ultimately vote on. So you see here on the slide that LAC members are designated spokespeople after there's been consensus of the LAC to take a particular stance. And that's the voting process that I'm referring to. During our meetings, the full membership is briefed on what the legislation is doing, how it impacts a particular organizational position, and they will hear about the recommended stance that's coming from the issue area team. We'll take a vote on that, and our consensus around that, whether there is a consensus to adopt that stance or not, kind of leads our next steps. And if we do adopt a formal stance, then we will lobby according to that stance. And then I mentioned that we've got our 35 lobbyists. We expect to land somewhere in that neighborhood again this session, although we are always open to new members coming in to expand our coverage and expertise. And of course, if we can expand regional representation, that's something that we're always very interested in. So the legislative session will be kicking off on January 8th, and they really start off with a bang. There were probably around 300 bills that were introduced in the first few weeks of the legislative session, so it does make for a really busy start. So we usually start our bi-monthly LAC meetings, or bi-weekly, I'm not sure, it's every other week. We usually start those meetings for the session about a week after the legislature has convened, because it gives our lobbyists a chance to sort of sort through the onslaught of bills, figure out what's most significant, where we want to dedicate our time and efforts, and get our bill summaries together in preparation for that meeting, where the membership will be briefed and recommended stances will be brought forward. So first meeting for the 2025 session of the LAC will take place on January 17th. They always run from 9 to 11. We do really try very hard to keep it in that 2-hour time slot. We know everybody is very busy, and you all have no shortage of appointments that you need to attend to. So over the years, we have tried to really make sure that we are not exceeding that 2-hour time frame. As a result, it does sometimes mean that we do not get to cover every bill that the membership wants to bring forward. And that will sometimes mean that following the meeting, we need to take care of some of the bill discussion and voting on a recommended stance via email, which I think runs pretty efficiently, but I know many of you recognize the fact that that doesn't replace the in-person live conversation and deliberation that we typically have. It's a little bit of a balancing act, because we do want to be respectful of people's time, but we also want to make sure that the legislation that we're considering gets adequate discussion, so our members feel like they have enough information to make an informed vote. For that reason, Maud and I have considered the possibility of an overflow meeting for January 24th, which would deviate from that bi-weekly schedule a little bit, just for this one time, because there is so much legislation that gets introduced right out of the gate. it's something that we want to kind of flag for you so you have it in mind. But once we meet on the 17th and kind of get a sense of what we're dealing with, how much progress we can make in that first meeting, and really what the desire of the membership is around, whether we do email voting versus an overflow meeting, there'll be more discussion on this. But I do want to just flag it so people kind of have it as a possibility in mind, because I know schedules book up quickly and everybody's really busy. So just to let you know sort of what we're thinking there. All right, so we also mentioned that, the information that we're hoping to share today is not just for the LAC. We, as an organization, one of our key purpose and functions is to, promote and facilitate informed civic engagement. And so, our advocacy and mobilization of our statewide membership is extremely important. And there are lots of ways that we want to flag for you all today as either possibly new information if you're new to the league, or a reminder if you've been a longtime member. Lots of ways to get involved. Maude kind of touched on calls to action that get issued from LWVUS. LWVCO also will issue calls to action, as will the local leagues. So these are something that, it's fantastic if you can keep an eye out for these through the session. And sometimes outside of it as well, but particularly where the LAC is concerned, it's going to be a call to action, typically around pending legislation that we really want to mobilize the statewide membership and have them weigh in, so policymakers can get a sense of not just the information that we're bringing to them via the LAC and our lobbyists, but what our local leagues are thinking on things too. So that mobilization and input from all parts of the state is really important. Another critical function that you can all serve is to be an information source in your community. We know that our league members throughout the state are closely in tune with both the issues that are happening at the state level, but especially what's happening in your own communities. And you all are following this, the happenings and, the actions of, both the state and local government in a way that not everyone is. So really kind of being a source for good, credible information is critically important, especially as we continue to live through an era of mis and disinformation. Another thing that is helpful is to analyze legislation. If you're a member of the LAC, this is obviously a critical function, something that you'll be doing throughout the legislative session. But it's important too, as information or bills get introduced and the LAC takes stance on them. It's always helpful to have perspective from our membership around the state too, those local priorities and the way that, a pending piece of legislation might affect your community that is unique or different from how, the impacts may come out in other parts of the state, really helps us, take a well-rounded approach to our advocacy. So, that is another important function that you all can play. And another significant thing that we really do all the time is looking to our partner organizations and other, key community stakeholders and organizations that produce trusted information and are, quality sources of research. They can be really important not only to inform our advocacy efforts, but to inform community discussions and to help educate the broader citizenry. All right, so just a little bit more about different ways to be involved. One of the things that we especially want to call attention to is the legislative action report page on the LWVCO site. I think we'll get into the navigation of that and some slides that are still to come. But our longtime members will recall that in the past we did our legislative letter, which was a print document. We have since moved to an electronic format. Partially to save paper, environmental concerns and cost considerations, but also since we started using bill tracking software, the bill list that you will find on the legislative action report page on the State League site update in real time. So it's helpful for our members, because the LAC members, because you know, we don't even have to go in and manually update, but it's really helpful for our broader membership to keep this in mind as a resource, because if there's a particular bill that you or your community is really interested in, you know, keeping an eye on those bill lists is really handy, because as it moves through the legislative process, those lists are going to just automatically update, and you will have current information on where that bill is in the process, if it's coming up for a hearing that you might want to tune into. You know, if it, you know, it ends up getting voted down, that's also something that you want to be aware of. So it just really kind of gives you all that information, in addition to our members regularly writing more expanded articles on a particular topic that you know, is really impactful to our organizational positions. We also have our program books that are posted on the the legislative action report. No, I'm sorry. I should probably wait until we get to the navigation of this and the slides to come. But point being is, I do want to call out that if you're looking for information on league positions, where the league stands, has got a wealth of information on those organizational positions, and you can access the program books there. As many of you, I'm sure, know and probably accessed information on the ballot issues, and you know, where the league stood on those, how we arrived at those positions, how they impact our organizational priorities and positions. So all kinds of information that we want to make sure that people are aware of. And then this information can all be used to, you know, help educate the community. We hope that it's helpful to local league members as you do your work in your own communities, but we are always open to suggestions on things that we can do to make it you know, the source of information that you know, is really useful for our membership. So please know that you can always reach out on that as well, or if you have trouble accessing it or using those bill lists, let us know, and we can be sure to walk you through that. Okay, so these are the slides that I was waiting for, instead of me kind of trying to guess by memory where things are. This is a little visual to just kind of help you hopefully easily get to these sources of information that we've been talking about. I think probably everyone is somewhat familiar with you know, where things are on the league site, but you know, as it is pretty layered, you know, it can often be a little difficult to find. But you know, basically when we're talking about where the league stands and how to get to that page and access information on the program books and the ballot issues, or if you're looking for the bill lists and the topics that the LAC is discussing, you're going to want to navigate via the Take Action tab at the top to the where the league stands page, or legislative action report, depending on you know, what information it is that you're looking for. So just a little reminder of how you actually get to that information. Let's see here. I'm wondering if we had the slide a little bit out of order, but we can kind of loop back to our previous topic just briefly to finish out our discussion about how to be involved, whether you're in the LAC or not. You know, one of the core functions that you know, our advocacy, or I probably should say forms, one of the core forms that our advocacy takes is communicating with legislators, whether that's in person or the LAC giving testimony. But you know, it's also writing, calling, emailing, sometimes personal meetings. there are, many ways that we can keep those lines of communication open. So we would definitely encourage you to keep those in mind. If you're not a member of the LAC, I do want to point out that, that communication should be carried out as an individual, not on behalf of the LAC or LWVCO. But certainly we hope that the information that we're putting out is useful to those conversations, whether it's via the LAC or if you're carrying them out as an individual. Another thing that we often do is submitting letters to the editor. That's a way to get good information out into the community in a really broad sense. We'd also encourage people to get on other organizations' mailing lists. This is probably something that most of you do and are aware of, but there's a lot of great stakeholder partner organizations that we regularly work with, so it's great to keep up with what they're doing. So often our advocacy work is carried out in coalition. So it's really important for us to keep pace with the priorities of our like-minded organizations because our voice is more powerful and louder when we can join together. So those are a really great source of information. And then if you haven't already joined an LAC or LWVCO task force or attended any of the meetings, I would encourage you to keep those in mind. We have got, I believe, 10 now that are covering some really priority issues for the league generally. So there's a lot of great discussion that is going on in the context of those task force meetings. So another source of action or other ways for you all to take action within the league. And here are the task forces. For those that have participated, you'll be familiar, but for those who may not be familiar with the task forces, you can see that they do cover a broad range of really key topics that impact our organizational positions. And I do want to call attention to the fact that our 10th and newest task force has begun meeting. This is the JEDI task force. For those that don't know, that acronym stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. A broad range of topics are included within that task force and within that category, that issue area within the LAC, as I'm sure you can imagine. So some really important work and topics being covered there that we would encourage you to tune into. I want to talk a little bit about the connection between the task forces and the LAC because they really are designed to kind of work hand in hand, to be a reinforcement and a support. Since the task forces were first stood up, I think there's been a lot of examples of good collaboration and areas where we've been able to really kind of take a broader approach to our advocacy, where our task forces are really kind of focused on discussion around issue areas and education and bringing in speakers to learn more about a topic and to kind of learn about things that sort of are coming up either through community action or community concern that we should be aware of, or new research. There's a whole variety of things that our task force guest speakers have spoken to to kind of raise for our membership. And through that, there are times where it kind of points to some advocacy that the LAC could take. And we certainly have a lot of cross membership between the LAC and the task forces. But one of the key things is that we do ensure that there is a liaison to LAC within the task forces, so we can have that cross communication, and that any information that's coming out of the task force discussions that might be helpful to the LAC or would potentially flag an area for advocacy that the LAC can take up we want to make sure that there is a person that can facilitate those conversations. So again, they really are intended to work hand in hand. Just sort of a quick example that I'll give from last session. Through the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force, we became aware of one of the bill recommendations that was coming from the Colorado Youth Advisory Council, a bill concept. For those of you that don't know, the Youth Advisory Council studies issues that are important to youth in Colorado. And based on their study of those topics, they'll recommend ideas for bills that can actually be developed into a bill and be introduced in the next legislative session. And one of those was around a gun safety issue that we felt aligned with our organizational positions, of course, but the task force was really interested in seeing the LAC advocate for this bill concept getting advanced to actually become a bill draft and hopefully eventually get introduced in the legislature last session. So through those conversations, we did decide to ask for an LAC vote to move forward with advocacy there. We ended up contacting COYAC to really voice our support for the bill concept. Ultimately, it was not one that has moved forward. And so it didn't end up being legislation that was introduced last year, but it's definitely something that we continue to keep our eye on. Oftentimes something that doesn't advance in one session will come back in either a very similar or slightly different form in a future session. So work kind of continues even if it doesn't end up advancing in the way that you think it might in one session. There's usually opportunity to continue work around that into the next legislative session and beyond. But for another example of some of the in-depth and on-the-ground work that LAC and the task forces are doing to work together, I want to turn it over to Celeste, who is a longtime member of the LAC, working within the voting and elections team on a whole host of legislation that impacts that area, but also Celeste heads up the alternative voting methods task force and some coordination between that group and the lobbying efforts of LAC around one of the ballot issues. So I will turn it over to Celeste to talk about that a little bit more in depth.
So the ballot issue that Andrea is talking about is Prop 131. And it, I think, had the most money spent on it of all the 14 state ballot measures. It did not, it failed, and we could go into a lot of thought about why that is or not. The task force had been studying it for multiple months. I attended almost all of the title board meetings. I think I missed the first one, where 70 versions of the Prop 131 initiative went through the process. We were, as the league, we were able to tweak the initiative to make it better than it started out being and to pick the versions that we liked better. Then it made the ballot. When it passed title board and there was a challenge at the Supreme Court, and then it survived the challenge at the Supreme Court. The state league wanted to know whether we should be taking a position on it or not. So the legislature wasn't meeting anymore. So we didn't have regular LAC voting and elections team meetings anymore, but the task force meets all year long. And so we have we're in the middle of a primary election reform study. So we used a lot of the information that we had from the primary election reform study to, in the end, recommend to the LAC Voting and Elections team to recommend to the state board of our league a support position. And we based it mostly on our national position, which says things like voters should not be excluded. And right now, voters are excluded in the primary. You can only vote a Republican ballot or only vote a Democratic ballot. You can't vote both, even if you're unaffiliated. And if you're a minor party person, you can't vote any of them. So we even though we're the Alternative Voting Methods Task Force, we saw the biggest advance in supporting democracy as opening up the primary so that everybody could participate in the primary. I don't know about all of you, but my general election ballot didn't have much in the way of candidate elections to worry about. They were all pretty much decided in the primary, if anybody even decided to run against the incumbent. So a lot of people talked about this being a ranked choice voting bill. We have a little bit of problem with that term, but that's a separate issue. But when we did our research in the task force, we realized that this is the biggest impact will be opening, having all the candidates run in the primary and everybody having a say in the primary. So there's no safe primary anymore, no safe seats for anybody, because suddenly the general election will be the decisive election. The four most viable candidates will move on to the general election. And so, but it didn't pass, so there we are. But the process was, we studied the issue. We, in the task force, we talked to the LAC elections and voting team, and that team voted on a recommendation to make to the LWVCO board. Anything else you wanted me to say, Maud or Andrea?
I think that that covers it nicely, Celeste. Thank you so much for the example and your discussion about that effort. I think it just really kind of illustrates the in-depth work that so many members of the LAC and the task forces are carrying out in collaboration. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Maud.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Celeste, for that example and all the hours and hours and hours you and Tony Larson spent listening to title board hearings. I cannot imagine all the work you did, and then sorting out and advocating for a more reasonable version. So moving on to partner organizations.
Maud, before we
Yeah,
get into the new topic, I just want to pause and see if Sandy has a question related to that topic before we move ahead.
I've had a lot of people ask me about this. I wanted to know if we voted for this, and I really couldn't remember ever voting for this, so apparently we didn't, correct?
So when the legislature is not in session, we do email votes, Sandy.
Well, so, did we do an email vote on this one?
We did an email vote on all of the initiatives that, as they were approved, to gather signatures, if there was a stance, if there was a position, and the issue group recommended a stance. So we had quite a few. We had quite a few email votes over the summer on initiative. So you won't remember live discussion because because we didn't have live meetings.
Okay.
So yeah. And you know, if an email vote comes through and you have a question on it, we're actually going to get into the weeds on that in December or January. We're going to make some online discussion easier to happen. Kathy Wilson.
This is just responding a little bit to Sandy. Sandy, you can go back into the Google Doc, that spreadsheet that we have for voting, and see what we voted on all across. I believe it's still there. So I know I have referenced it after a vote as well, just to be sure, just to get some background information that's posted there as well.
Yeah,
I think Maud just said that we didn't do it that way because the session was already over.
No, sorry. Yep. We did do email votes, and Kathy Wilson is right. We still do have the spreadsheet. So in your email would be a link to the spreadsheet. If you send Andrea and me a request for a link to the spreadsheet, we'll send it to you. We can't do
okay.
it.
I wanted to have an answer for people.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. The Legislative Action Committee voted on each of the initiatives that we took stances on.
Thank you.
So yeah, good question, Sandy. So Linda talked about partner organizations, and they are a wealth of information and assistance and more hands and minds. And I work, as most of you know, I work with the other members of the revenue fiscal team issue group. And we have two strong partners in the Colorado Fiscal Institute and the Bell Public Policy Center. I can never get their name right. We just call them the Bell. And revenue, I've worked on state revenue for decades in three different states, but bills will still come by where I go, what? Huh? What's or wonder what other people's thoughts are on supporting or not supporting. And several times a session, I will email partners at Colorado Fiscal Institute and the Bell and say, what are your thoughts on this bill? And they will get back to me with just really thoughtful comments. And they also will share inside information on upcoming bills or negotiations on big bills, negotiations on amendments, because they may be in the room and we may not on some of the bills. It's fun to be in person for those of us who can, in the legislative hearing rooms, because we can sit with our allies and compare notes and, oh, you're saying that, oh, maybe I'll change my point here. And our partners will have events. It's fun going to those events, meeting them in person, spreading the word of the league and learning what our partners are doing. So it can lead to new members for the league and a lot of, we're really stronger together. So how do we find state partners? If you are not, if you're an LAC member or planning to become an LAC member, Legislative Action Committee member, you will get a link to the Legislative Action Committee Toolkit folder. And there in that folder is a link to the partnership spreadsheet. There's also a request form in that toolkit folder so that you can ask if you find a group that you'd like to have on our partnership link, list, you can fill out that form and send it to LAC leadership, to Andrea and to me. If you're not yet part of LAC or don't want to become part of LAC, and I see in tiny font, I see Kathy Wilson's name. Thank you, Kathy, for doing a screen share on this, to screenshot on this to get this in our slide deck. You do need to log in as a LEAP member, and then a members tab will pop up, and go to documents, partnership folder, and then click on the partnership chart. And then we have an example of what the partnership chart looks like in the next slide. So it goes on for, I don't know, there are probably at least 50 partners in this, and there's how to contact them, what their categories are, what the organization does, and of course what their mission is. So if you're working on something and you say, there's some other people we know, other groups we work with who are working in this area, go look at if you don't know, go look at the partnership chart. Even if you do know, you may find some groups you hadn't thought of before. And then the next slide has examples of a few partners. Great Education Colorado. I think it was Kathy Wilson who reached out to them for some questions for candidate forums for Vote 411, or a candidate forum for school board or state board of education. And they were extremely helpful. Here's a whole list of questions we think candidates should have to answer. The State League, LWBCO, is a member of the Colorado Social Legislation Committee. So we, as members of the State League, can drop into any meeting of that group. They hold regular Monday lunchtime Zoom meetings during the legislative session. It's a different topic each week. I suspect many of us have been to these meetings, and I've found them, again, very useful. They'll bring in an expert on a particular topic, social legislation topic. I don't think Rionda is here today, but Ceasefire Colorado is one of several gun safety advocacy groups that we work with as well. So whatever your issue group, there are probably other groups working on it. And
Rionda is here.
Oh, Rionda is here. Thank you, Rionda. I hadn't looked through the list lately.
Hello, hello.
Or carefully enough. Hello, Rionda. Yes, yes.
Yes, I am here, and I do want to emphasize that Ceasefire Colorado is just a premier organization. They are informed, they're active, and they're a great source of information. They are also part of the Colorado Coalition Against Gun Violence, which brings together Ceasefire, the Brady organization, the
moms, are moms in it?
Yeah, there are moms
Demand
there.
Action.
Yeah, they're the Gifford group and several others, and they are working now to think about what the legislative agenda is going to be for the next session. So in a month. Yes, we do have partners, and they are wonderful.
Yes, they are absolutely wonderful. And we also have the same sort of process for joining coalitions. Rionda, thank you for mentioning the Gun Violence Prevention Coalition. I just mangled the name, I'm sure, but that's what they do. Again, we have the partnership form is the same form for asking to join a coalition if we're not already members. So one of the things we do with both our partners and with local leagues is coordinate testimony. And for a real life example, a great example, Peggy Leach is on, I believe. And part of our voting and elections team. And she's going to talk about coordinating testimony on confined voters, people who are in jail but not currently serving time for a felony, coordinating testimony with a local league member on Senate Bill 24072. So take it away, Peggy, if you would, please.
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I worked with, well, okay, so when the bill came up, our voting and election team looked at it, and I think I was the one that worked on this one and came up with a write-up for LAC to consider, and passed it by our group. And then Linda Thomas from the Larimer County League asked if she could testify on behalf of her local league. And so the local league gave permission, and the state league gave permission for her to do that. And then I could then testify on behalf of the state league. So we had two testimonies from leagues. Her perspective was that their local league had been doing for several years voter registration in the Larimer County Jail. And one of the big objections to this bill was security of voter workers, if they were going to be working in the jails. And so she wanted to emphasize that they had been doing voter registration for years and had never run into any security problems. Also, just the whole, feeling that it gave the inmates that somebody actually cared. And so we coordinated our testimony. She sent me her testimony. I sent her my testimony. I mostly talked about just, why the League of Women Voters of Colorado would support it based on our positions, and then gave an example of Cook County, the jail system there, where, again, once people were aware of their right to vote, they were so grateful to be informed of this. So, so then she was working with Kyle Giddings from the Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. And he was arranging all kinds of testimony from past inmates and county clerks and, and the league and all this kind of thing. And we always wanted to make sure that Linda testified before I did, so that I could refer to her testimony. And we were able to do that. We testified twice, once in the House, once in the Senate. And in the Senate, we were far enough apart to where there were a lot of arguments against this bill. Linda had already testified. Kyle already had too. And so now they just wrote me some notes about what I should say about some of these things. Real life examples about what had happened in the Larimer County Jail and those kinds of things. And so when I got up to testify, I quoted them and said, this is what I hear from people who have actually been on the ground about their experiences. And so, changed my testimony. I mean, I had a little bit of my original testimony, and of course, saying that the League of Women Voters of Colorado supported it. So that was the main important thing that I was saying. But anyway, it passed, and I heard quite a bit about it during this election season. So a lot of the sheriffs were against it, and especially if they were in small jails, and they didn't know how they were going to handle having in-person voting for part of a day. But and there were some changes made to the bill to kind of accommodate that. And so anyway, it passed, and I heard Amanda Gonzalez, who is the county clerk of Jefferson County and who used to be the executive director of Common Cause in Colorado. Anyway, she had testified in favor, and she she said lately that they had about 300 inmates vote this year, as opposed to 3 that voted in 2022. With this new system, it greatly expanded the outreach to inmates, and so many more got to vote. Any questions or anything else I should say here?
Wow. Thank you, Peggy, for a great example of coordinating with a local league member and with people in allied groups, with partners, and for talking about revising your testimony on the fly to deal with what other people have said. That's a just really critical skill to have.
Yeah, and it was a little scary because one of the committee members asked me about one of the numbers that I had said. And I said, well, like I said, this is from somebody else, so I can't quite say myself what happened, but this is what I heard. So, it was a little scary because I couldn't quite, I couldn't from personal experience say what had happened, but I was honest about it and said I couldn't tell them. So.
And the I don't know, I will get back to you line is our get out of jail free card all the time. It's a great question. I'll get back to you. And so thank you, Peggy. That is a wonderful example. And Kate Van Houten put in the chat that there were a number of mentions of this on national cable news segments. So maybe people in other states will realize, oh, you can do voting in jails. That would be fabulous to have this spread.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many people in jail that have not been convicted of a felony.
Right.
Haven't even been convicted of anything yet.
Right. They couldn't make bail, or they're waiting for a bail hearing, or yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly, I mean, ballots can't be forwarded from whatever their last home address was. So yes. So lobbying in the state league's name, only LAC members, Legislative Action Committee members, with permission from the full LAC, can lobby and testify in the state league's name. All of us can testify as individual Colorado voters. And then as Linda Thomas did on this confined voter bill, folks can testify with permission of the local league, but please coordinate with the state league so that we speak with one voice and our testimony melds. Our task forces can bring statewide perspective, so that coordination with task forces, because we have LAC members, some in the rural area, but most of us are in the Front Range, but we have task force members often from further afield. Again, task force members speak as individuals unless they're part of the LAC and they're speaking with the LAC hat on and LAC permission. And just as Peggy talked about, coordinating with either a local league or a task force testifier, and with our partner organizations, different speakers can take different points. Any questions on this slide or specifically on testifying? I know that we'll get into more detail in the second and third session. Okay, I am turning it over to Andrea. Oh, I wanted to say one more thing, sorry. If you came in late and you didn't have a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, please name, local league, preferred pronouns. Are you an LAC member? If so, are you coming back for 2025? And what your what issue you're interested in. And also, if you're not an LAC member and you're interested in it, please put that in the chat and then also email us. We'll have our addresses at the end. Now it's Andrea.
Thanks, Maud. And thanks, Peggy, for that great example. I'm going to talk a little bit more about navigation, specifically about how to find our positions, because as you know, we've really tried to emphasize that as the starting point for all of our advocacy. It's key to, you know, how we carry out our lobbying, or if we carry that out. So being familiar with the positions in general, but particularly in the issue areas that you're focused on, is just really critical to lobbying on behalf of the league. So we talked a little bit about, you know, heading over to the Take Action tab, getting to where the league stands page. Hopefully that feels pretty straightforward to people. I think on our next slide, yes, next slide, we've got pictures of the program books that you know, will guide your advocacy efforts. First one is the state program book, Program of Study and Action. You know, our state league positions are sort of where everything starts. But I do want to point out that the LWVUS impact on issues is very relevant too, because of course we can use those positions in our lobbying efforts as well, and we often do, or a combination of the two. So both of these books are available in a digital format on the website. Hopefully the navigation is pretty straightforward for those that aren't familiar, but if you're struggling, please just reach out and we can make sure that you land at the right place. Knowing the positions in your issue area will you know, make the lobbying work that you do on behalf of the league you know, really run smoothly. So we would encourage you to study those or refamiliarize as we start to approach the 2025 session. Oh, and I do want to point out that work on the new state position book has been underway for some time, and we do expect that to be out before too long here, definitely before the session starts. Okay, so a little bit about our positions and principles. I know we've mentioned that you know, we only act on legislation that is supported by our positions and organizational principles. Really can't say that enough, because we don't ever want to be in a position where we are spending our time or speaking to something that we don't have an organizational position on. So that really is first and foremost where we start. If we don't have an impacted organizational position, that's as far as the consideration goes in terms of any advocacy on a particular piece of legislation. Our positions are intended to be flexible. They're pretty broad in nature, and you know, that's intentionally so. We want them to be durable over time, and many of them have been, you know, established for you know, decades, which is, you know, really part of our credibility. The fact that, you know, we are not swaying with the partisan political winds. You know, our positions are well considered. Many are very long-standing, and you know, they you know, there are guiding principles as an organization that really kind of help us sort of weather, you know, the partisan sway, and you know, just, you know, the you know, you know, all of the partisan discussion that you know, kind of gets tossed around as you know, policy making and deliberation play out. Those positions keep us grounded. So extremely important. And the fact that they are broad in nature allows us to apply them you know, to a whole host of legislation that you know, we'll see introduced from one session to the next. They really are very flexible in their use. So that is helpful. And then, as I mentioned, we can use both the state and national positions, or sometimes a combination of the two, as backing for our advocacy efforts. I want to point out the table of contents for the LWVCO position book because, for one, it will help you navigate exactly where you want to go. Because the position book, particularly for our new people, it can seem a little scary because it's broad. As you can see, we cover a wide range of topics, and our positions span government, natural resources, social policy, as you can see. So, and then there's, all kinds of issues within those broad categories. So this will help you navigate, but this also helps us organize our categories, our issue area categories that LAC works on, both within our issue area teams and thinking about how to, kind of allocate bills amongst LAC members and the issue area that they specialize in. So you'll kind of see how we go from that index to using those to categorize our LAC categories for lobbying. This will, this sort of guides the breakdown of our issue area teams. It also guides how we establish our bill lists that you'll find on the legislative action report page. So, just being familiar with those, the breakdowns of the organizational positions kind of helps you think through how we're going to be approaching categories for LAC. I mentioned earlier that the session will start on January 8th, and LAC will be convening work work will start before that. Work is underway, but we'll be convening our meetings about a week after that. So please mark your calendars. And as the General Assembly convenes on January 8th, we will immediately see all kinds of bills introduced. And I want to point out a couple of different ways that you can navigate on the General Assembly site to find those bills, because one of the key things, one of the first things that an LAC lobbyist will do is to start monitoring the bills that are being introduced in your issue area, so you can begin to discuss with your team which ones impact our positions and which ones are significant enough that we actually want to spend our lobbying time on them. So you can go to this tab up here, the second over that says bills. That'll bring up a search function where you can look at all the bills. You can look at them by category. You can search by session if you have a need to go back to previous sessions. But mainly, you're going to be focused, at least early on, in the things that are getting introduced right out of the gate, so you can start to get a handle on what that looks like. You could also go down here to find a bill, click there. That's, I think, a little more useful if you know the number of the bill that you're looking for. But point being, there's a few different ways to get to the bills in your topic area. And again, if you've got questions or have trouble, please just reach out. This one is kind of an example of, once you've clicked on that bill link, you can see that there's different ways to access bills by topic. You can search in the search function, or you can look below and click on one of the issue areas that will help you narrow your search. So again, a few different ways to get there. This here is a little graphic that I think I see the date down at the bottom, that it was created way back in 2001. We still like to share it and circulate it because it's just like a handy graphic that gives you a quick visual of the process, which, there's still a lot of information on here. For our long-term LAC members, you're well aware that there's a lot of steps in the process for a bill to go through before it goes from introduction to eventually getting signed into law. So this is sort of a handy graphic that we like to call people's attention to, because you can sort of flow chart it through the process depending on exactly what's happening with it. So very important to monitor your bill's progress as they go through the General Assembly. We testify, as Peggy mentioned, we testify in the committees of reference in both the House and the Senate, assuming that it lasts that long. It's possible that it'll get killed before it leaves its house of origin, and then, you know, obviously we're not going to be testifying on that. But you know, as we're monitoring it, we want to make sure that we're attending and possibly providing testimony. Sometimes we don't. It kind of depends on what, you know, what our strategy is around you know, the lobbying for a specific bill. But you're going to want to follow it through that first committee hearing in either the House or the Senate, depending on where it originated, and then following it over to the other chamber where it goes through the same process. You want to pay close attention to amendments because you know, sometimes significant changes are happening, sometimes so significant that it'll actually cause us to reconsider our stance on a bill. And LAC will often want to weigh in on those amendments, or we may see something about a bill that we think, you know, we see a way to make this better. And so we'll actually suggest an amendment. So really important to follow your bill through the whole process so we can make sure that we're on top of it as it's advancing. Kathy Wilson, I see that you have a hand up. Please jump in.
Just really quickly, there's a new graphic that you can use. Kathy Marr and our team in Larimer have been really updating our website significantly, and Kathy just put that on our legislative action team's webpage, the new one on the webpage. So you should check it out.
Oh, great. We will definitely do that. Thank you for flagging that for us. It's always helpful to have like those infographics to, you know, sort of distill what's happening. We'll
Yeah, and it looks more updated. So
yeah, this one reminds me of like the Schoolhouse Rock days. Yeah, so probably an update's in order. But yes, thank you for pointing that out. We'll check it out. Okay, so the other thing that I want to point out is how to find the committees. This is relevant in the interim where we are right now, but it's very critical during the session. So first tab up, you can see that you know, you've got the interim schedule. That'll tell you what's happening with the interim committees, and we do follow those you know, throughout the interim time frame. And then when the session starts, we're going to be looking for those bills that are introduced that we're interested in to get assigned to their committee of reference, which basically just means the committee that has the subject matter purview to deal with the bill in question. So you'll click on that, and I think we probably have more here. Yes, you've got your list of committees once you've clicked on that to kind of figure out what it is you're looking at. So you know, depending on where you want to go, if you know your bill's in the House, you're going to be looking for the House committee of reference. If it's in the Senate, you'll be looking there. There's also the year-round committees that some of you will need to access. Our fiscal people are paying close attention to the Joint Budget Committee, which meets year-round, interim included. And then, you know, as I mentioned, the interim committees, which are relevant now, but you know, will become much less so, you know, come January. So that's just a way, and this list is from 2023. So you're going to see a little bit of change to some of the committee names. Maybe not every session, but they do change with a fair bit of frequency. But they're usually named pretty logically. So the jurisdiction of the committee is pretty clear. If you are curious about exactly what a committee can consider as part of its purview, you can click on that and then look at the description of the committee, and that'll give you a good sense of what jurisdiction the committee has essentially. All right, and with that, I'm going to shift it back to Maude.
Super. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you for the individuals who've been giving great examples. Reminder, if you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself in the chat, please do with your local league, your preferred pronouns, the issue areas you follow, if you're in the LAC and plan to return for 2025, or if you're not and you're interested in joining. So And if you joined late or you know someone who was not able to join us because maybe they're being grandma and taking care of kids, someone whose school was closed today, as Christina Manthe is, we will have a recording of this available, but I think not posted on our public YouTube site. I think it's email Andrea and me, and we'll get you the link. As Andrea said, over 600 bills are introduced most sessions. I think it was closer to 700 last session. It was like, poof. We don't follow all those bills. We follow 100 to 150 bills. First question is, as Andrea said, does the league have either at the state or national level a position or a principle that can be used to support action? And then remember, our most important resource is our own expert volunteer lobbyists' time. Does the issue group have the LAC member time to lobby on this bill? Is this bill a good use of those resources? And sometimes we can have more impact on a little bill because there aren't many people speaking on it, and we can talk to the legislative sponsor about this little tweak would make it better. So again, talk to the members of your issue group about what you have. Do we have a position on this? And if so, is it something that's worth that we should be spending our time on? The interim committees, Andrea showed a list of committees. The interim committees can propose bills to the Legislative Council for the upcoming session. Sponsoring legislators can propose up to 5 bills, and legislative leadership has more bills they could propose. I don't even know how many. In Colorado, and this is not true in all states, in Colorado, all bills get a committee hearing. So many bills are already being written or are in draft form. Early introduction gives them time to get through or maybe not get through. We may see 300 bills introduced in those first 3 weeks of session. So January is a bit of a tsunami, which is why we're thinking of an overflow meeting on January 24th. A few tidbits. On the next slide, Andrea. Yes, thank you. Both houses have state affairs committees. They're titled slightly differently, but the short name is state affairs. And they legitimately hear and take thoughtful action on bills in several areas, including veterans, voting, and elections. They're also where bills on other topics are set for the required hearing that all bills get, and then are given a quick vote to PI or postpone indefinitely, which is why the nickname of the state affairs committees are the kill bill committees. So the House Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader assign the committee where a bill is going to go for its initial hearings. And if you see a bill going to the State Affairs Committee, look and see whether it's part of their main purview or if it was sent there for a quiet death. We'll meet again in the middle of December, Fridays 9 to 11, just as the regular LAC meetings are. Our last meeting will be just before session starts, and it's the most nuts and bolts meeting. Andrea, next slide, we're talking about the possible overflow meeting. Even if we have the overflow meeting, we're going to stick to our every other week starting from the 17th. So we'll meet the 17th. We might meet on the 21st. We'll meet again on the 31st, and then it goes on every other week after that until session winds up in early May. Any questions? Oh, I was going, no?
I don't have a question,
Yeah.
Maud, and I don't see any hands just at this moment. But I'm a little bit worried that I may have gotten off on the slides. I think we had another possible example from Kathy Wilson about the content of libraries,
We did.
libraries. So I just want to see if we maybe need to back up, or we can give Kathy the floor if if you're amenable, Kathy. I'm not sure where we got off, but
I don't know where that happened either. I do remember we talked to Kathy. Thank you for being willing to give an example of how a bill that dies once its session might reappear in a slightly different form the next session. So
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I'll do it quickly because
yes,
I know you're coming to toward the end. In the last session, Senator Cutter was the main sponsor who introduced Senate Bill 2449, which was content of material in libraries, and it included public libraries and also public school libraries. This became controversial because of the public school libraries, of what could be protected and what could be taken out. And so when that bill was introduced in the Senate Education Committee, it was killed. Then it was voted down. And that was at the very beginning of the session. But she kept working on it, and at the very end of the session, she and other legislators introduced Senate Bill 216. So you could see between 49 and 216 how many bills were in between this. So this was at the very end. And this bill was standards for decisions regarding library resources. This had to do with only public libraries. So the whole public school libraries issue was taken out. And it's a terrific bill. It's one that we sent out an action alert across the state for, and had a very strong interest and response from our members. It passed. We celebrated when it did, and the governor signed it. So that has gone into effect to really give protections in what is in our public library systems across the state. I contacted Senator Cutter and her aide at the beginning of August to see if she was thinking about trying to bring back the public school libraries element of what was taken out the last time. Adrienne Doms her aide told me that she was working on this, but nothing had been set. I sent an email again at the beginning of this week to see anything, but I think with all the activity that was happening around the general election, I think most likely they were waiting to see also what was going to be happening in our General Assembly. So I don't know yet. I'll keep you posted if that one comes up. For sure, we will let our members know, because again, the whole issue of what can be available to the students in our schools is very important. It's very important. So I'll let you know. To be continued, hopefully.
To be continued. Yes, sometimes the piece that drops out of a bill, there's still legislators interested in bringing them back. It can take, and it can, for an individual issue, it can take several sessions to get something through. So thank you, Kathy, for that story and that example. I'm not seeing any raised hands or any questions in the chat. I put our, so in the next slide, we have our contact info. And I dropped it in the chat as well. And if you have, remember, if you have a suggestion for a new co-director of action and advocacy, please email Andrea and me. We are recruiting. It is a fascinating thing to do because we see everything that goes through. Again, when you all have questions, we're the ones who go, and work on figuring things out. And I mean, we are absolutely here to support the great work of all our wonderful expert volunteer lobbyists. The two of us could not possibly know everything that you all know. And we just want to support the work that you do. And so it's really fun. Nominate someone or yourself. Please send us an email. And then we just want to thank you, and we will see you all again, we hope, December 13th.
December 13th, yes.
December 13th. And again in January, just before session starts. Again, if you are not in the Legislative Action Committee and you're interested in joining, please do email Andrea and me, or you can just send it to the General State League address, info@lwvcolorado.org. So with that, if there are no other questions, we will give you 5 minutes of your morning back. Thank you, everybody, for everything you do. And remember, at noon today, a general discussion on the election and the aftermath and what we can do and any eventing we want to do. But this group, of course, is involved in working where we really can make a difference at the state legislature. So thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone who spoke too.
Yeah, thanks. Good meeting, good training. Professional development.
Yes, you're the one who told me.
I'm the one who told you
Thank
to
for
do
that,
that.
Kathy.
Oh.
Shirley. Bye. Thanks for joining.